All right, well, good evening, everybody. It is September 29th, 2022. We are finally back to our regular scheduled programming after Hurricane Ian. And I first want to say, really thinking of the people on the west coast of Florida, this was extremely devastating storm. So I hope everybody is safe and well. At the last time I heard this morning, the state of Florida is predicting several hundred casualties from the storm. So very dire situation here in Florida, especially on the West Coast. So obviously thinking about all of our friends in Fort Myers and the like. So if you guys can afford to do so, I'm sure over the next coming weeks and months, there are going to be fundraisers, things like that, or even if you could provide a little bit of a helping hand personally, that would be appreciated down there. I know that many people are affected. It is a horrible storm. I want to say one more thing. A lot of the footage that we've been seeing that has been coming out of Fort Myers really reminds me of Hurricane Sandy as it impacted Long Beach, Island Park, Oceanside, because the storm surge is really horrible. I mean, it pushes water and pretty much everything you can imagine. Sand. I remember walking the streets of Long Beach a couple months after Hurricane Sandy, and there was still sand in the streets. So it's just insane to look at. But the good news is we are back on our regular scheduled programming. So for those of you who are new here, we usually go live about 5 days a week between New York City and Miami and discuss the financial markets. And there's definitely not a shortage of things to talk about tonight. So we are going to go over the massive movements in the bond market. We saw that 10-year yield come down a little bit. We're having a little bit of weakness here in the dollar, so we'll talk about what that means for markets. We are also going to be talking about the housing market here a little bit. So as of today's close, the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage is going for about 6.82%. So if that is the average, that means there's probably people that are already getting quoted a 7% 30-year fixed. We'll talk about what that means for the housing market. Also, we're going to be talking about a specific book that I recommend everybody read during these times, and that is called Keeping at It by Paul Volcker. Now, we talked about this book before and the importance that I think it brings, especially now as we are going into, I would say, uncharted territory as it relates to monetary policy. But I think we can look at some similarities and differences between past Fed presidents, and I think it's going to be very important to talk about Paul Volcker, as he was really one of the only Fed presidents that I would say didn't listen to the crowd and just went along and did what he had to do, which is raise interest rates at the time all the way up to 20% to battle at that point, which was March of 1980, 14% inflation in the United States. That's all I got. So let me put away my laptop and we will get started with the live stream shortly, and I will say hello to all of our viewers in the chat. So give me 1 minute. We're back at the 200 Southeast Financial Center. And it was actually a beautiful day here in Miami. Clear skies after the storm. All right, team, we are good to go. Let's see who we have in the chat tonight. I see Gregory is here. Says, good evening all. My friend Vonda Howard, the ABX girl. ABX girl, please be safe, my friend, because this storm, Hurricane Ian, is so crazy that it moved all the way across Florida. And now reports is that it is once again turning up and headed towards the Carolinas. So it is no longer a tropical storm. I think it is now a hurricane again headed towards the Carolinas. So this is just really insane stuff here. So please, ABX girl, be safe. I see my good friend British Gray in the chat. It's good to see you. Good to hear that you're in the chat. Obviously, you were in Tampa, Florida. So definitely good news to see you in the chat. Hopefully not too much damage was done in your neck of the woods. Which elevator we gotta get? Let's see. Wow, they with us. But the AVX girl says, thank you, the wind is already here. Yeah, so I filmed the video about, what was it, 2 days ago, I think? So 2 days ago. We'll wait till we stop buffering in the elevator. Give me a sec. Jewel Morris says, I'm in North Carolina near Chapel. Okay, the internet should improve now that we are out of the elevator. Hey, Matthew P is here. Zozo Bob says, hey, Tom, lots of flooding here in Orlando. So, Bob, are you flooded at your particular home, apartment, wherever you live? Hopefully not too much flooding. They even took precautions here in downtown Miami. You could see all of the doors of the 200 Southeast Financial Center are all sandbagged. They took the sandbags off these doors, but here in Miami, specifically downtown Miami, Brickell, we were pretty much unfazed by the hurricane. So we got extremely lucky here. Up north where I am, we did have a tornado actually touch down about 4 or 5 blocks away from where I live. I didn't even notice it. But thank God, just minor damage. I know Fort Lauderdale, I was talking to some people in Broward County. There was a couple tornadoes that touched down there, but by and large, I mean, Miami, Florida really only got hit with some of the bands of Hurricane Ian, obviously not taking that direct hit, which means that we didn't get any of the storm surge, which is the worst. So we definitely lucked out. Hey, Sunshine After Rain is here. Good to see you. It's good to be back streaming again. Beautiful night here in Miami amongst this beautiful, massive American flag that is flying right outside of the 200 Southeast Financial Center. Laytha says, hello, Tom, and everybody in the chat. Hope all's well. Hey, Laytha, thank you for joining us at our hurricane stream at my house. Hopefully you guys enjoyed hanging out at my house 2 days ago. I had a good time. GX72 R2D2 says, beautiful. Mike C says, I don't think there were any tornadoes in our area. Well, that's good. Now, I'm not sure, Mike, what the exact count is, but I think there was something like 7 tornadoes that touched down between Miami-Dade and Broward County. But yeah, I mean, everything is pretty much done. You know, the storm was pretty much over here, I want to say 2 o'clock yesterday. It was actually a very nice night last night, and today was beautiful weather. So let's see who else we have. I see R2D2, Sally is here. British Gray, Sunshine After Rain. Philly is here. R2D2 says, I'm expecting rain in Ohio. Yeah, this storm was one for the ages, for sure. NG says, Tom, quite a few people here in Orlando are without power and serious flooding. Luckily, my family has power. Well, thank you, God, for that. Surprisingly, I lost power twice. Now, it wasn't too bad because it was so windy that it wasn't that hot. And I know the running joke is that Floridians really aren't worried about living without power from the hurricanes. It's the going without AC or air conditioning in 90-degree weather, 100% humidity. That's what is not too convenient. But last night I went without power and it was actually kind of nice out. Wasn't hot. There was a breeze. So everything was good on my end. But everybody, I'll quickly just say I mean, looking at the devastation from Fort Myers, it was like the exact photos that I have from, you know, one of my uncles that at the time was in Oceanside. And the storm surge is just so bad. And I want to reiterate this. Please do not underestimate any type of storm surge, especially if it's over 4 feet of storm surge. It just decimates communities. And during Hurricane Sandy, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Long Beach, New York, but they had to rebuild the entire community pretty much. And still, and I spend much of my time in Long Beach, still there are houses to this day that are still just being in completion, because essentially after Hurricane Sandy, what you were required to do in relation to FEMA regulations is you had to elevate your house. So what they were doing, and I remember seeing this, it almost looked really, really crazy. I'll see if I have some photos from you guys and I'll drop them in the Discord. But they were literally picking the houses up and elevating them on stilts. So if you wanted to build new construction in Long Beach or Island Park, Oceanside, you literally have to put your house on stilts. So what I'm thinking is Fort Myers, the good news is it's obviously going to be rebuilt, but it's going to take a long time. Just based upon my estimates for Sandy, we're still doing some construction. Lower Manhattan is still building elevated seawalls and things like that. So it's going to take some time. And I remember the sand there was like 5 feet of sand in the streets during Hurricane Sandy. And from the photos that I've been seeing on Twitter, and I was watching the news today, it seems as if it's almost the exact same thing, maybe a little bit worse, that happened during this storm, Hurricane Ian. So please do not underestimate these storms. Now, after the storm has passed, you could see how still the water is. Now, I posted a video on the YouTube channel. It was actually filmed right over here on the Miami Riverwalk. And this is crystal clear and very, very calm waters. But in that video, there was literally white caps in the, I guess you can call this the bay, I guess. So if you want to check that out, it is up on the channel. Hey Dan says, hey Tom, can we get some Aston Martin Tower video? Yeah, so supposedly one of my buddies said that they are going to extend the Miami Riverwalk to be right behind the brand new Aston Martin building. But here it is right here. It is almost complete, almost. Hey Layla says that video looks more like Honolulu. I was just watching before I arrived here. Yeah, and so that's pretty much all we got here in Miami, Layla. Essentially, technically we didn't get the Hurricane Ian, we got the bands of Hurricane Ian. And the wind gusts were probably like 70 miles an hour. So I could only imagine what it was like there of about, I think, over 100 miles an hour, maybe sometimes more, of sustained winds. I can't even imagine being in that. That must have been an absolute nightmare. But beautiful, clear skies here. If we want to take a look at the markets, here's what we're looking at. Okay, so the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ have now tested their June lows, all right? So over the past couple of trading days, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ have actually broken below those June lows, but have since rallied back to about break even with the June low. Now, we tried to have a little bit of a rally day on Wall Street yesterday and a little bit throughout the day today, but we gave all of that back. Now, here's where my concern is. Obviously, as we look at the market mechanics and we see that 10-year US Treasury yield every day ripping higher to the upside, I think as of recording this video, the yield on the US 10-year, it actually came down a little bit, 3.738%, okay? We still have a crazy inverted yield curve. The 10 and the 2s are quite inverted by quite a few basis points. The 2-year yield is yielding about 4.2%. Now, my biggest concern is that the dollar, the Dixie, actually came down quite a bit today. Okay, I think the Dixie hit a high of about 115. I think we're down to about maybe 112. 10-year yield came down, but we still couldn't hold a rally on Wall Street. And I was on the phone with one of my good friends who runs a hedge fund, and he's like, you know what, this reminds me a little bit of what it was like during the 1987 stock market crash, when you had an extremely weak market or as they like to call it, the breadth of the market. And this is where we can run the risk of these very, very serious type flash crashes. But we'll talk about that a little bit as the night progresses. Austin City Limits is here. Good to see you. Jeremy Master, welcome. Thank you for joining. Buff20 says, hey, Tom and chat. Glad you made it through the storm. Thank you so much. Buff20, appreciate it. Looks like we have some sort of a barge coming through here. Man, it is, you know, one thing I did notice is after any really big major storm, and this includes big snowstorms in New York, it's almost always the day after the storm, it's like the best weather. Everything feels clean, the air smells great. It's a very weird concept, maybe because it's a lot of low pressure moving through the area. Yeah, Zozo Bob says Biscayne Bay looks so smooth tonight. Yeah, and over the past couple days, Zozo Bob, this entire area was like white caps. Big Toe says, what's up? Latha agreed. All right, so let's continue on our way. We are actually going to go over the bridge here, head to Brickell. I'll give you one more shot of the brand new Aston Martin building, which is going to almost be complete. Mike C says, Tom, I remember that crash of 87. I was in my 20s and I hadn't started investing yet, so I really wasn't affected. So Mike, I have a cool story for you. So one of my old coworkers had an original copy of the IBD newspaper. And this was back in the day when Investors Business Daily actually printed a daily copy of the paper. Now it is weekly, but if you want to read the paper, you could still read it every day. It's just going to be in digital format. But back in the day, they did used to print the paper every day. And my friend has an original copy of the, not only IBD, but the Wall Street Journal as well, right after the crash of 1987. And I bought it off him. And I like to collect all of those old newspapers. So anytime there's a major event in the, not only the financial markets, but I think just bigger picture like global macro, I always like to grab a headline and save it for a later date. Yeah, Latha says, I remember that paper. Well, my theory is, I mean, it's an interesting piece of history to have, right? I mean, some people collect, you know, trading cards like baseball cards, Pokemon cards, well, whatever. People collect a lot of stuff. I have a feeling that, let's say 30 or 40 years down the road, I think these original copies of big headlines of physical newspapers are going to be worth a lot. And it's just an interesting hobby I have, just to try to collect notable headlines. Like I saved all of the papers from the COVID crashes. I still have one of the Wall Street Journals, which was probably the most dystopian looking cover of the Wall Street Journal ever, that I saved. And this was when they were building, I'm not sure if for the non-New Yorkers here, during COVID, and I was in the city for COVID, it was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre, to the point where they were literally setting up tents in Central Park because they thought the hospitals were going to be so overrun that there was going to be sick people laying in the street. So on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal, I think this is when the Dow was down like 1,500 points in a day, maybe a little bit more. And on the front page, the front cover of the Wall Street Journal was all of these makeshift tents in Central Park. And the headline was something along the lines of projected tens of thousands are going to be sick and dying in Central Park. It was like the most dystopian, crazy headline ever. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to save this. And it is pretty wild to see how far we've come. You know, here's another interesting tip as it relates to investing. Now, this isn't always a surefire thing. but it's always interesting to gauge some of the sentiment. So whenever, and this doesn't apply to the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or let's say any of the Main Street financial newspapers, but it applies to like the New York Post, okay, the New York Daily News, maybe the New York Times, something like that. Any type of newspaper that really doesn't talk about the stock market all the time, whenever those, I like to call them Main Street publications, start to talk about the financial markets, whether it's housing, whether it's equities, whenever it's on the front page of the newspaper, it's pretty much a good sign that the bottom is in. And I'll tell you a quick story. So I was walking into my office. I actually used to still work from the office sometimes during the height of COVID, because I had like a VP approval. I was the only one in there. And I was walking past this newsstand. It was one of the only ones that was open. And I see this big New York Post headline. I'm actually going to post it on my Twitter if you guys want to see it. If you follow @WalksWallStreet on Twitter. And so I was walking past like one of those little newsstands. And on the front page of the New York Post, it has the Wall Street, like a cartoonish looking Wall Street bull with one of those COVID masks on. So the bull has a big mask on and it says Wall Street is sick. Dow Jones down 5,000 points. And I was like, yeah. And I took a picture of it. I bought it, took a picture of it, sent it to my friend. And I'm like, I think the bottom is pretty close. And I think 2 weeks later, the market bottomed and went on to rally to its all-time record high. And I think the VIX at that time blew up almost over the 2008 financial crisis. Ooh, you know what that means? It looks like we're gonna have some sort of a big boat come over here. I hear the noise. Let's see. But yeah, that's just an interesting piece. Anytime there's, okay, here's another one. Shepard Smith. I think everybody knows Shepard Smith. He's arguably one of the most famous and most notable journalists ever. Whenever you have like an NBC nightly news covering the stock market, either in a positive light or the opposite light or a bearish light, that probably means the market is about to move in the complete opposite direction. But anyway, that's just sort of a little bit of a sentiment indicator. Hey, Blake 46 is here. Says, I was there Sunday for the Bills-Dolphins game, returned home Monday. Hey, Blake 46. That's awesome. What did you think about Miami? You know, I've been here for about a year, and I've still yet to go to a Miami Dolphins game. So maybe one day I will get to go there. But these two buildings here, I get asked about these all the time. So this is the W Hotel and Residences. So I believe on one side is a hotel, but the other side are residences, and it is together with the Icon Brickell. And these are like your luxury condominiums. Now, if you go back on my channel, I posted a video of the crazy Hurricane Ian, one of the bands we got. I actually filmed it right here on the other side of the river. Hey, Dutchman, says Tom, hello. Did you see that article? Morgan Stanley had to pay $35 million in penalties to the SEC for security lapses and not removing data from hard drives sold on auctions. Yeah, Dutchman, I did see that. So I'll tell you a quick story, and Dutchman, I'm glad you brought that up. So back in the day, early on in my tech sales career, I was actually selling a product into the investment banks. Now, the company was called Movius at the time. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of it. I'm not even sure if they're around, but it was sort of like a multi-line type product, right? Because there's many, many conflicts of interests in banks, and you're not allowed to, essentially, you're not allowed to send any type of client information on personal devices. So let's say if like the sales and trading department is texting or calling one of their clients and talking about potential trades on their personal devices, that's a huge, huge no. Investment banks had to pay massive amount of fees as well because traders and things like that were communicating over applications like WhatsApp, I believe. And I think these what is the specific regulation? Maybe somebody could help me out on it, or Google it for us. I think it's Sarbanes-Oxley, something like that. But check out this company called Movius. I'm not even sure if they're still around, but they make sort of like a software tool where it allows your specific device to be containerized to have a personal line and a business line. And I think when I was selling that particular product, we were selling it through a channel partners. And I think somebody on an enterprise team at the company I used to work for sold like 13,000 lines to Deutsche Bank, or it was either JP Morgan Chase. But it was a product at the time, it was called Multiline. It may have been spun off into something else. Maybe a company acquired it. I think T-Mobile has acquired it now, but yeah, you're right. It's a huge, huge issue. Really for a conflict of interest, things like that. But I did see they had to pay a massive fine for that. But I believe the company is called Movius. Yeah, I used to actually sell into some of the banks. Latha Sarbanes-Oxley. Yes, you're correct. Thank you for that. Will says Tom, Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 basically has a lot of regulation around internal controls over financial reporting. Thank you, Will. There was another one that I can't quite put my name on it. Oh, check this out. Looks like Jaws took a huge bite out of that. Hey, Dan McLaren says there's a funny saying regarding what you're talking about. When shoe shine boys start giving stock advice, the bottom is here. Or the top is here, I think. When shoe shine boys start giving stock advice. Yeah, I think that actually came out of a book, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, covering the life of Jesse Livermore. But yeah, it's true. Now, not in all circumstances, but pretty much, right? So anytime like the New York Post, anytime, the New York Times has or is talking about the stock market on the front cover, you could pretty much know you could take the opposite side of that trade. Wow, but it is beautiful out here tonight. And it seems so quiet. For some reason, usually there's tons of noise, people doing burnouts with their cars, but it's extremely, extremely peaceful tonight, which is very uncharacteristic for Miami. So I'm actually enjoying this quite well. Hey, Julia M is here. Good to see you. Welcome. Oh, really quick before I forget. So I wanted to talk about a specific interview that Neel Kashkari did. I think it was either with Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal, I forget. But Neel Kashkari is the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis president. And, I've been getting a lot of emails and talking amongst friends and people. And everybody just seems so, I guess, for lack of a better term, trigger happy. Because I don't really know how else to describe it. What should I buy if I have to buy something? And if you're actively managing a portfolio, you don't have to buy anything, right? I would really just follow the trend here. Obviously, the overall trend of the broader market, S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones Industrial Average are severely below their 250-day moving averages. But don't fight the Federal Reserve here. On many, many occasions, and it's not only Fed Chair Jerome Powell. I think this is a Miami police boat here. Let me zoom in on that real quick. Yeah, I think it may be. I think it's very important during times like this to not fight the Fed. Okay, and it's not only Fed Chairman Jerome Powell that is signaling to the market that they are going to be unrelenting in raising interest rates. They don't care if unemployment spikes. They don't care if the equity market corrects even further. And if you paid attention, and I actually gave everybody a direct link to the speech at the conclusion of the FOMC meeting, Fed Chair Jerome Powell actually said, as it relates to the housing market, that housing needs to go through a quote-unquote correction. So he's telling you that he is not going to be satisfied until valuations start to collapse and start to come down. So I would say cash is king right now. If you're actively managing a portfolio, you don't have to go in here and buy a bunch of names, right? A lot of these names that were the previous true market leaders during the 2020 rally and the 2021 rally, these things have been getting absolutely decimated and absolutely clocked. So I have a couple of names that were former true market leaders. And just for some context here, let's sort of visualize price performance. Because if you go back about 5 months, 6 months ago on the stream, I think I actually did a stream that was titled Ignore the Buy the Dippers, right? If you remember, anytime you would turn on CNN, anytime you would talk to your buddies, everybody would be like, oh, buy the dip, and it was this big meme. And it works until it doesn't. And I think a lot of those people probably now are either completely decimated and wiped out or are well on their way to doing so. And I think they took a lot of people along with them. And one of the real reasons why I think that is because in 2020, you had a bunch of people who were very, very new to investing, either have never worked in the business or just didn't have experience in general. You were locked away in your homes. There was no sports to gamble on. There were no casinos to go to gamble your money. So the only casino that was available for you was the stock market. And that's exactly what it turned into. The equity market and global equity markets turned into a complete and utter casino with people doing live streams. I remember watching it. People would be doing live streams at their desk saying, oh, I'm going to YOLO, which stands for you only live once, into this particular meme stock, and I'm going to trade derivatives and and calls and puts. And these people don't even understand really how to do any of this stuff. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. But the point is, here's a couple of names that were former true market leaders in the last bull market, and we'll check in on their performance. So ticker symbol PTON, or Peloton, at its all-time high, it was trading at $172. As of today's close, it is trading at $7. Okay, ticker symbol ZM, or Zoom, the very famous video conferencing stock, at its all-time record high, it was trading at $589. Today, as of today's close, oh, is that a fish? Oh no, it's a piece of debris. As of today's close, it is trading at $74, okay? And yes, some of these companies that we're talking about, obviously Peloton, negative earnings, horrible company, terrible fundamentals, everybody piled into this thing, right? So you never really want to go where it's the next best thing, because nothing is ever the next best thing. And you could be buying the dip all the way down to zero. DocuSign, another big COVID darling, getting rocked, trading at $55 from all the way at its all-time high, $313. Another one is Cloudflare, ticker symbol NET. Oh, we get to see the Metro Mover going over here. Beautiful. Ticker symbol NET was trading at $220 in its all-time high, now trading at $54. Square, which is actually now called Block, ticker symbol SQ, was trading at $288, now trading at $55. So whenever a lot of these people, and I know there was one in particular gentleman, Dave Portnoy, and look, I think Dave's a great guy. He's super funny. He has a great company. But, you know, when you do these things, like say buy the dip, stocks only go up, and you have a huge audience, people follow you blindly into these ridiculous ideas. Now, if a person like Dave loses, 12, 13, 15 mil, it's really no shirt off the guy's back. He's a billionaire. I think he was minted a billionaire actually last week when he sold additional amount of pen. But there's a lot of people who have been throwing money into these garbage names that have no earnings, right? Declining sales growth. So I think it's very, very critical and important here. If you're managing a portfolio, you cannot afford these ridiculous drawdowns here, okay? You need to be able to manage your risk. You need to have sell rules. You need to learn how to invest the proper way based off of valuation. Because what a lot of people didn't understand, and we've been talking about this on the live streams for a long, long time now, that once interest rates go up, the first stocks to get hammered, the first stocks to get freaking their faces ripped off, are the very speculative high beta growth stocks. Now, if anybody has worked in investment banking, or you're just very, very read up on the financial markets, you're probably familiar with like a discounted cash flow model. So the purpose of those models are to evaluate companies' future cash flows. Or what is the value of a business's future cash flows? Well, when interest rates are artificially suppressed for long periods of time, that allows these very, very speculative, high beta, high growth companies to focus only on top line revenue growth. They don't have to focus on the bottom line right now. Maybe they have earnings projected out 3 to 5 years in the future, okay? So those earnings are worth a lot in today's value because interest rates are pretty much zero. However, once inflation started ramping up and the Federal Reserve had to increase the Fed funds rate, well, what happens? The future value of those companies' earnings are now worth less in today's dollars. So the market has to reprice those stocks for a higher interest rate environment. And a lot of new investors or people that are just trying to gamble, they don't understand that. So obviously they hold these stocks all the way down 90, 80%. And this has happened time and time again since the equity markets and stock markets were invented. So I just really wanted to bring that up on tonight's stream. Hey, we have the Mighty Bull here. Good to see you, Mighty Bull. We are now overlooking the City National Bank, or Miami Tower. As well as the Wells Fargo Tower, but it looks like the Wells Fargo light is off. Hey, Line Sync is here. Good to see you, my friend. I see NPC 007. Thank you for joining tonight. Jeffrey says this place is safe. Yeah, very safe place as we head into Brickell. So if you look straight ahead, you will see the Brickell City Center, the KPMG building, and the WeWork office where I sometimes work out of. Hey, Danielle Baca is here. Daniel says, looking good, Tom. Good to see you, Daniel. Line saying, says, Tom, good to hear you collect newspapers from Landmark Moments. Do you keep the entire paper or just the front page? I keep the entire paper. Because here's what I think may happen. I think it's only a matter of time that everything goes completely digital. So I think by the time that I have kids, and by the time my kids are my age, I think that they're going to look back and they're going to be like, what? You guys actually printed physical copies of the news? How ridiculous is this? I think it's probably going to get to that point. I think the reason why the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Barron's, IBD still print some of their newspapers now is because there's a lot of, older individuals or people like me who my eyes are really, really terrible that just can't read on the computer or on the internet. Everybody, I wonder, for all the people that are from Miami, this space, look at how massive this space is right here. And it's right on the river. I could only guess it's only a matter of time before some big developer comes in and builds a super tall high-rise right on this piece of land here. Now, I'm sure there's probably already plans to develop this, but this just looks so strange to have a massive vacant lot amongst all of these massive super tall buildings. So I'm sure there's going to be some development here. Hey, Buff20, good to see you, my friend. Yeah, Laytha is like, Tom's kids will be saying, yeah, my dad still reads the newspaper, how embarrassing. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure to pick up my kids from school with 2 big bundles of newspapers in my hand just to embarrass them. Eyeglass Lady says, thanks, Tom, for streaming. That tells me you are well. Thank you, Eyeglass Lady. Yeah, I mean, Miami, Florida really got spared, thank God. I mean, we can't say the same about the West Coast. Definitely our heart goes out to everybody on the West Coast of Florida, especially Fort Myers and the like. Some of the videos that I'm seeing and photographs that I'm seeing on Twitter and on the news is just insane. Reminds me of Hurricane Sandy when it hit New York and New Jersey. So the City National Bank of Miami Tower, you see it all lit up. If you remember back like 10 minutes ago on the live stream, that massive building, the Aston Martin building, supposedly it's gonna glow exactly like that. And if that's the case, it's just gonna make the downtown Miami skyline look insane. It already looks super futuristic with all of the Metro movers, the Bright Line going through the city. Now, it's obvious we can't have tunnels here in Miami because you know, flooding and things like that. But did anybody hear, I think we may have talked about this. I actually think Ryan Royal may have brought this up. But supposedly Elon Musk's Boring Company is in contractual negotiations with the city of North Miami Beach in order to build a tunnel from, I think, 168th Street all the way to Sunny Isles Beach. Now, I don't even know how that's possible, but then again, I'm not an engineer, I'm not smart. Elon Musk, I'll leave it to him. If they can do it, that's fantastic, but I just don't see how that's possible. But I guess it would be kind of cool to have an underground tunnel going from North Miami Beach. I think the plans, I was looking at it, I think it would start from 162nd Street, go up to 168th, and then over crosstown to Sunny Isles Beach, which is the billionaires row of Miami. But we'll see. So supposedly Elon Musk is in talks with North Miami Beach to do that. We'll see. Wow, Dan McLaren says, I think the Miami Tower sold recently for a loss. That's insane. You know, I posted a video, I think it was on my IG or something like that. The Millennium Tower that is directly across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. That building is so beautiful. And I think the vast majority of the building is all residences. But supposedly that building sold for a loss too. I'm not sure how that's possible, but I forgot who told me about that. I think it was one of our viewers. I just forget the name. Yeah, Buff20 says, I did hear that, Tom, about the Boring Company. Yeah, I'm not too sure how credible that is, but see, here's the thing, Buff20, and again, I'm not an engineer, so take what I'm saying with an extreme grain of salt, maybe a half a grain of salt. Everything here in southern Florida is very porous limestone, so I don't see how we could have a tunnel. And that's why Florida is very, well known for sinkholes and things like that. And one of the big problems we have here, especially in Brickell, is the flooding really doesn't come from water going over the seawall. The flooding comes from literally underground that goes up through the storm drains. And that's because we have very porous limestone that the city is pretty much built on. So I'm not sure how a tunnel would work in that environment, but again, I'm not an engineer. Hey, Green Star TV says, isn't the depreciating prices of Miami real estate because of weather disasters in the future? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely probably some risk priced in there for hurricanes and things like that. And over the past 2 years, Miami real estate has gone gangbusters. Some of the highest, most expensive real estate in the country is here in Miami. So as we talk about the housing market, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, because we've been seeing some monster moves in the bond market. So as of right now, that 10-year U.S. Treasury yield 2 days ago in overnight trading hit 4%. We're coming back down to about 3.78%. We are inverted yield curve. 2-year Treasury yields trading at about trading at about 4.206%, and that 30-year fixed rate mortgage, the average 30-year fixed rate right now is about 6.82%, which means that there's people getting quoted below that and people probably getting quoted 7%. So as it relates to real estate, I think the markets that saw extreme turbocharged growth due to the pandemic, you could think about markets like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Houston, Texas, Austin, Texas specifically. I think those are going to be the markets that have the biggest corrections, because that's how it always is, right? Usually the markets who heat up the most during a bull market are the markets that tend to, come down the most during a bear cycle. And we heard from Fed Chair Jerome Powell at the conclusion of the FOMC meeting last week, and he said, and I quote, "I'd like to see the housing market go through a correction." So I think the Fed is going to continue to raise interest rates. Now, technically speaking, everybody, when the Federal Reserve raises rates, it doesn't impact mortgage rates. Now, what does impact mortgage rates is that 10-year U.S. Treasury yield that tends to move in lockstep. But as the Fed raises rates, traders price in those rate increases, thus increasing the rate on treasuries, which impacts the mortgage market there. But I think you're right. I mean, big superstorms, look what we just saw with Hurricane Ian. A lot of that stuff is probably going to be priced into the housing market. Another thing I'd like to say is, if you think about the most desirable places generally, right? And I think we can go do some back and forth and arguing, which I get. But generally speaking, the most desirable places to live, New York City, people want to be there. Miami, Florida, people want to be there. LA, places surrounding Los Angeles, California. Unfortunately, these places are very prone to big storms and cataclysmic weather events. But I think that's just the nature of the game. And I think everybody who is, either from Long Island, New York, or from any of the boroughs in New York City, it comes with the territory. I think same thing for people that have lived in Miami their entire life, Southern Florida. Hurricanes, superstorms are just sort of, I guess, the cost of living in paradise in some extent. I think my biggest concern, though, is a lot of these insurance companies are being forced to pull out of markets altogether, such as Southern Florida, a lot of places in California. Insurance companies are just not writing policies anymore. And that is due to many, many reasons, but one of them is due to a lot of these superstorms. Is that true? They just finished a massive tunnel connected to the port of Miami, to the city to transport shipping containers? Wow, I didn't hear about that. Could you please share a link? I would love to see that. Not a big fan of your username, but if you could share the link. Hey, NYC Dub is here. It says, hey Tom, I have a prediction. Citizens Insurance, the state-funded insurance company of Florida, will not be able to meet claims demand and Florida will invoke assessments to all homeowners to pay the difference. Crazy. Well, we already got assessed. What I think is going to happen is, so you're right, Citizens here in Florida is, I believe, the largest insurer, and it's essentially a government subsidized insurance company, because we've had so many privately owned insurance companies just pull out of the state of Florida in general. So I think that's one of the things, to NYC Dub's point. If you're thinking about moving to Florida, Southern Florida specifically, you have to weigh all the pros and the cons. Okay, it's just like moving anywhere else. So you have that increased risk. You know, now I will say, I think one of the main reasons why a lot of these insurance companies have pulled out of the state of Florida is egregious mismanagement as it relates to fraudulent insurance claims for a lot of these roofing scams, which has really decimated and put a lot of pressure on insurance companies. So you have a little bit of derelict in the duties of government there. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to weigh all the pros and cons. And if you're gonna buy a piece of property, here's what I always say, and I've said this almost to the point of ad nauseum on the stream. If you're gonna buy a piece of property in Southern Florida, okay, it doesn't matter what your realtor said. I had a realtor tell me, oh yeah, the property's in a really bad flood zone, but don't worry, you know, make an offer anyway because you have flood insurance. If you deal with anybody like that, you respectfully say, okay, yeah, I'll think about it, and then you completely block their number altogether. So look for a location that is not in a flood zone, because some areas in Miami flood if it's just like a random regular storm. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have flood insurance, it's a big pain if you flood. So typically you want to look for a flood zone. Typically you want to look for flood zone X is the best zone to be in. Or you just buy a condo where you're many stories in the sky, where you don't have to worry about flooding and things like that. But if you're gonna buy a single family home, maybe duplex or triplex, something like that, fourplex, definitely know the location that you're buying. What I would do is, if you're gonna buy in Southern Florida, here's a tip that I have for you guys. Find one of the most rainy days in Miami and drive your specific neighborhood when it is raining like crazy. And notice the streets. Are the streets flooding? Is the front yard flooding? That's what I would do. Now, there's tons of fantastic real estate agents here and real estate professionals in the state of Florida, but there are some that'll just tell you, no big deal. Everybody has flood insurance, just do it. That is definitely don't do that. Definitely do not do that. Hey, Brevard County Real Estate. Good to see you, man. This is the insurance companies have more in cash than the Catholic Church. Don't buy their sob stories. Well, I mean, I guess we could check, right? Especially these publicly traded ones. We could just look at the 10Ks and the 10Qs. Hey, everybody, we have a fellow Miamian. Action Kid is here. Says Brickell floods a lot, especially on Brickell Avenue near the Publix. Even if you're multiple stories up, you won't be able to get out, says AK. So Brevard County Real Estate, I know the storm just recently hit you. Hopefully you're fine. So AK, where is the Publix? I don't think I've ever seen the Publix down here. I think it may be this way. Brevard County says MetLife has billions in cash. Yeah, well, I think the thing though, Brevard County Real Estate, maybe to give a little bit of pushback on that. I mean, you're right, but at the end of the day, insurance companies is all about risk mitigation, right? And like, I'll give you an example in the state of California. So the state of California, one of the reasons why a lot of these insurance companies are pulling out specifically is the state will not allow private insurance companies
to raise insurance premiums based upon future forecasts of risk. So I'll give you an example. A lot of these insurance companies will hire like geologists, meteorologists, consultants to say, okay, let's say if there's a particular neighborhood in California that is very, very prone to wildfires, right? Or brush fires, things like that. The consultants will come in and the insurance company will essentially say, based upon climate change, yada, yada, whatever. I don't really want to argue about climate change on the stream, but you guys get the picture. Based upon changes in the climate, whatever, you may agree with it or not agree with it. In the next 5 years, do you think that this particular neighborhood will be at a greater threat, lesser threat, or equal threat to fires? And maybe their consultants say, oh, it's going to be, you know, a 25% more likelihood that this particular neighborhood will be in a fire zone. In which case, those premiums go up on those policies. California is like, no, you can't do that. Which is kind of insane because California is one of the states that is probably most hammering on this ESG, environmental social governance, and biggest believers in climate change. So if you think that these fires are going to be more persistent, wouldn't you allow the insurance companies to adjust for risk based upon those parameters? Now, I don't know. I think they should be able to. But then again, to take the other side of that argument, you could say, okay, these insurance companies are price gouging. But what have we seen over the last 5 years? We've seen storms become increasingly worse, right? Like the hurricane we just had. We've seen multiple fires in California. So I think it's a very sticky situation. I'm actually not too sure, to be honest, what the right answer is, to be quite honest. I just think it's fascinating to see it play out. Hey, Light Engine is here. This is Tom. Floridians are seeing homeowners insurance become costlier and scarcer because for years the state has been the home of too much litigation and too many fraudulent roof replacement schemes. Yes, Light Engine, you are 100% correct. I was actually watching a documentary. I think it may have been CNN Business, who did a very, very good documentary about all of these fraudulent roofing schemes. So you're 100% correct. I will say this. My insurance premium for the year actually went down for whatever reason. Now, it wasn't by a lot. I'm not going to say, oh, it went down by like $1,000. It went down by a couple bucks, you know, maybe like $100. Now, many of you are saying, what, $100? That's a lot. Well, we pay a lot of money here in Southern Florida for homeowners insurance. I pay over $4,000. So now I think one of the reasons why my homeowners insurance went down is because I believe FEMA downgraded my location from flood warning to flood risk, I believe. I don't know the exact reason, but it was like a $75 to $100 savings. I was actually quite surprised about it. Hey, speaking of a fellow Miamian, we have the one and only War Walker right here at the Metro Rail. Good to see you, War Walker. Abby One is here, welcome. Brad Swade says, there's a reason why IBM purchased the Weather Channel. There are trillions made in weather forecasting for businesses. Weather patterns are now very unstable. Yeah, Layla says, Tom, many Californians can't even get homeowners insurance due to the fires. You know, I think a lot of that stuff may start to happen here. Well, I mean, it is already happening here in relation to, you know, higher tides, flood risk, things like that. Hey, we have Dan Zhang here. What's up, Dan? Oh, check this out. We got a cat. You guys should see all of the cats in my neighborhood. I probably have maybe 20 or 30. Let's see. This one actually looks pretty well fed. Hey. I don't think he wants anything to do with me. Hey, Brevard County Real Estate says FEMA maps aren't based in any flood history. They are calculated on probability formulas. In other words, government in partnership with the insurance industry. That's a very good piece of information to know, Brevard County Real Estate. Thank you for sharing that. So Brevard County Real Estate, I actually, you know how I found that out? And I found that out 48 hours ago. You know how I found that out? So if everybody could just read Brevard County Real Estate's comment, I think that's a very helpful and useful comment to everybody. So I was watching, obviously, you know, I didn't know if this storm was going to hit Miami that hard. So I was watching the governor's Ron DeSantis speech, or update, if you could call it that, right? Update for the storm. And there were a lot of people in Miami that were, not Miami, excuse me. There were a lot of people in Florida that were getting confused about their evacuation zones because they were looking at those FEMA flood maps. So there's a difference, and there's a big difference. So just because you're in flood zone X doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't have to evacuate. Many people that did live in flood zone X in parts of Fort Myers still needed to evacuate, but they're like, you know what, I'm gonna stay because I'm in flood zone X. Hey, Greg Peters. Just wonder what happened to that manatee. Ah, yeah, I did post a picture of that manatee. So I live on one of those canals, and usually whenever we have a big storm or heavy winds stirring up the surf, a lot of the manatees will head towards the rivers for warmer water. And that's why you'll oftentimes see a lot of manatees congregating in waters very close to power plants, because manatees crave the warmer waters. Hey, Maria's here. It's a beautiful night. Good to see you, Maria. One UPS DS1 says Miami is not damaged from Hurricane Ian. Well, thank you for letting us know. You know, there were a couple tornadoes that did touch down just north of my house in Fort Lauderdale in Brevard County. Hey, Francisco GM says, hey Tom, happy to hear you are great and safe. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I did want to touch on one thing very, very quickly. And this is probably going to impact a lot of banks' earnings going into next year. So we've covered the topic almost to the point of ad nauseum, but I think it's very important, of rising interest rates, and especially keeping our eye on that 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which as of recording this video, September 29th, the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage is going for about 6.82%. So that means people are getting quoted below that. And some people, based on your credit history, credit score, things like that, are getting quoted above that, maybe even 7%. So to me, what I think is very important to take into consideration is a lot of the refinancing business that a lot of these banks perform, and which is actually very, very lucrative for a lot of these banks. Well, I don't think I need to tell anybody on this live stream that knowing that we've been in this pretty much a decade of artificially suppressed rates, almost everybody who's purchased a home over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years probably has a 30-year fixed rate of already below the current interest rates of 6.82%. So a lot of the underwriting fees and a lot of the income that these banks make in performing loan refinancing has pretty much gone to zero overnight. So that is going to make a major impact to earnings, which will probably start to show up either in Q4, going into Q1 and Q2 of next year. And you can really thank the Federal Reserve, because if you think about what happened after the Great Financial Crisis, we started QE1, QE2, however many QEs you want, TARP. The Federal Reserve has gone on a bond buying binge of buying not only mortgage-backed securities, purchasing US Treasuries, and just leaving the federal funds rate artificially suppressed as it is. So you have all of these homeowners that are already probably have a sub 5% interest rate. So there's literally no reason why you would ever want to refinance your loan. Now, I understand there's some very nuanced cases here, but I will say this. You're going to start to see a lot of layoffs at banks as it relates to the mortgage department in general, as it relates to originations, and also as it relates to refinancing, which may have a material impact on earnings. Now, if we take a quick poll in the chat, how many of you right now that have a mortgage on your home have a sub 5% interest rate? And again, you don't have to type in the chat if you want to remain anonymous, which is fine. Everybody pretty much has a pseudonym anyway. But just as a quick survey, maybe we could just get some anecdotal data here. How many people in the chat, number one, own a home or own an investment property? And what is the interest rate on your debt? I would love to know in the chat. I'll go first. My rate is 3% on the dot. Hey, Dominic says my rate is 2.875%. Yeah, so why would a guy like Dominic ever want to refinance at over 100% of what he's paying now? Cindy Foley's like, I have sub 5%. Yeah, Dominic says 30. Are you at a fixed rate? Yeah, I'm assuming it's a fixed rate, not an ARM. Sabrina Fair says I have around 3%. Abby One says I have around 3%. Wow, Maria says, Tom, mine is 2.8%. Brad's Brain says yes, below 4%. Jeez, so almost everybody in the chat who's participating. Gus says so Inix is 4.5. Hey, CR is here, good to see you. Tucson's is 3% fixed. Hey, Ken Glass has paid off the house last November. Love that. Okay, so it seems as if Max says I have a 5% in 2019. It's still very good. Light Engines is the penthouse on Billionaires Row is going for $250 million. What is the rate on that? Probably going to be just a cash deal for. I don't want to. I'm just going to bite my tongue. Maybe if the stream wasn't as big as it is now, I would say my thoughts on that, but I'll bite my tongue for now. Hey, Sunshine After Rain says I own my home. Awesome. Congratulations on your success. Love that. So now I have an additional question. And I think this is important to explore this together because I do think. That's a nice car. I do think that you're going to see housing prices come down here, okay? That is my thought. So I say if you are in the market right now for a home, right? You're a first-time home buyer, and you're pretty well capitalized roughly. I would say that in Q1 or Q2, you're gonna get a very, very good deal on a place. And one of the reasons why I say that is because you are gonna have extreme negotiating power. Number one, if you have a lot of cash, because the buyers right now that prices haven't dropped yet, keyword yet, the buyers that you have right now have significantly diminished purchasing power. So it's going to be very, very hard for these individuals to close. So if you have cash and the seller wants to get a deal done, you could probably negotiate some very, very good terms or an extremely discounted price. 007 is where is Bill Ackman's tower? Ackman is 157, I think. I think so. What's next is as interest rates increase, housing prices must decrease. I mean, in theory, yeah, you're right. Running at altitudes is in some markets, home values have continued to drop. Yeah, I think you're going to see Miami, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Austin, Texas. Those particular markets are probably going to come down, which is good. Which is good because let me see if there's a light thing. Usually, there's like a little button you can press on the pole. So anyway, I'm sort of getting off track. Now, I have a question for you guys, and I think this is important to ask. So let's say now that I would say over 90% of the people in the chat, those who have participated, have an interest rate on their home below 5%. I think that's fair to say. I think that's fair to say based upon the responses. So under what circumstance, or let's say if you were thinking about moving or thinking about selling your home, do you think that this could potentially, what I'm about to say, all right, I'm just gonna cross anyway, and if I get hit, I have accepted that fate, because this is a very, very long light. Assuming that you need to sell, let's say if you're planning on selling because you got a new job in a new city or something like that, would you be hesitant to sell because you're like, oh man, I'm just gonna have to go back into the market with 50% or 100 or 50, about 50% reduced purchasing power and get almost a 7% interest rate? So would you A, say, all right, you know what I'll do? I'll rent in my new community and then rent out my existing single family or duplex, triplex, whatever you have. Would that sort of, and again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but would that sort of be your thought process, right? So let's say if there was a big life-changing family event, you have to move across the country. You're like, I really want to sell the house, but if I sell the house, I'm gonna have to go into my new market and just buy something else at 100% higher interest rate. Why don't I just rent out this property and then rent in the new city I'm moving to? Would that be sort of the thought process you guys would have? Or what would you say? So Max says yes, that is a real thought. Maria says exactly yes. Abby says yes. Julia M says yes. What's next is yes, I would rent. So everybody says yeah. Interesting. Max's new job would have a relocation package, would also be a huge role. Yeah, so I mean, so here's the reason why I ask that, is if we look at the data, in 2006, I think it was March of 2000, or August of 2006, there were roughly about 3.8 million homes for sale on the market. Now, I may be off by a couple 100,000 homes just because I can't remember the exact statistics. So maybe if somebody wants to Google that, could you guys Google how many homes were on the market for sale in August of 2006? I think it was about 3.8 million. And here's the reason why I say that. If you look at the amount of homes that are on the market right now, there's still only about 1.3 million, which is just not enough supply. So a lot of people think that, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate here and give a bull thesis and a bear thesis. I think it's important to explore both, because there's some people think that the housing market is going to crash, everything's going to go to zero, and it's going to be a total wipeout. And other people think that the housing market is just going to cool a little bit, even though we have 7% rates. But their sort of thought process around that is, why would anybody sell their home when the next home that they have to purchase is at a 7% interest rate when everybody has a 3% rate, right? Assuming that you have a job and assuming that you're not forced to sell because you can't make the payment and you're going into foreclosure, something like that. So that's sort of the thought process. And I think that may be an explanation of why we just don't have that much inventory on the market. Zozo Bob's new mortgage applications are down 30%. I thought they were down more than that. So here we are at the Wall Street of Miami. We're going to be walking down here a teeny bit near the JW Marriott. Julia M says no true. This is so true. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a very interesting place. Hey, Lil Yellis here. Says glad to see that you're okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate your concern. Jeff W says exactly. Keep that cash for your business startup. That's where renting will be beneficial as well, says Jeff W. Billy says depends if the home prices are dramatically lower. Along with the cost of living, I'd sell and buy a new home in cash, and with the extra, make down payment on another local property and rent it out, says Billy. Good thought there. I saw a comment from Brevard County Real Estate I wanted to read. Let me see. Okay, here we are. Brevard County Real Estate says Airbnb depending on your location, or sell if your location is prime. Tom, it's okay to rent when you sell. Rent for 2 years, then buy. Yeah, so I think, so one of the reasons why I said that is not because of moving to a new location, should you buy right away or rent. More along the lines of, based upon where rates are now, would that influence your selling decision? Does that make sense? Not, I understand the thought that you're moving to a new city, it's best to rent for 2 years and then buy. I get that. That's not really why I asked the question. The reason why I asked the question is we still have this shortage of supply, right? Right now, there's about 1.3 million homes for sale. And in August of 2006, there was 3.6 million homes. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is, let's say if I own a home, right? And I'm paying a 3% 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And I know if I sell and I want to buy something else, not only is my purchasing power technically, assuming I make the same income and everything like that, is going to be cut in half, but I would have to be paying a higher interest rate. Would that influence my selling decision and make me say, okay, I'm not going to sell my house. I'll rent out my house and I'll just go rent somewhere else just because I just can't afford it. Now, I think that may be coming into play. I'm not sure how much that may be coming into play, but I think it's interesting to think about this from many different angles. Now, assuming the Fed really, really gets aggressive here, which I think they're going to, and take interest rates to the rafters, that is probably going to push up unemployment. So right now, the unemployment rate is roughly, I think, 3.7%. I'll give you guys a view of the JW Marriott. Beautiful hotel here. So the unemployment rate is roughly about 3.7%. Now, what other time in history could you point to and say, you know what, this era of monetary policy reminds me of, let's say, XYZ era of monetary policy? And to me, this reminds me of Paul Volcker. So if we think about, Light Engine says there was 3.9 million homes on the market in 2006. See, I knew I was a couple 100,000 off. Here's the reason why I say this. And I'm gonna give you guys some homework. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, it's Thursday night and this guy is giving us homework. I gotta do it. Gotta do it. I want everybody to pick up this book. It's called Keeping at It by Paul Volcker. And here's the reason why I think it's going to be very important for you to read this particular book. Because Paul Volcker was the former Fed chair of the Federal Reserve in 1980. And earlier on in the stream, we talked about the Neil Kashkari interview, where he said that we don't want to make the same mistake as the Federal Reserve did in the 1970s, where they were raising interest rates incrementally, and they actually saw a reduction in inflation. So what they did is they quickly changed course and pivoted and actually started to cut rates, which actually led to the stagflationary environment of the 1970s, which led to about 14% inflation in March of 1980, in which case Paul Volcker said, you know what, we're gonna keep at it, and we are gonna take interest rates to 20%, we're gonna kill inflation, but during that, unemployment went to about 10%. So I think it's important to read that book to study the history of the 1980s, understand what happened, because we could be going into a pretty similar situation if the Fed continues to raise rates, especially if the Fed funds gets to 5% by the end of 2023. I think you could probably see 5% unemployment in America, in which case there is a thesis for people to say, look, there's probably going to be a substantial uptick in foreclosures, which in relates puts more supply onto the market because people are losing their jobs and they're unable to pay their monthly payment. So if we think back to what Ray Dalio says, if we think back to what Stanley Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, they say the best investors are the best students of history. So I'm seeing some similarities here between Paul Volcker's style management of monetary policy and what Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is doing. So check it out, check out that book. Once again, it's called Keeping at It by Paul Volcker. And essentially it's a story of why he raised interest rates so high. Yeah, Brevard County Real Estate says the Fed is guessing it's a train wreck. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people that have been coming on the big financial media channels and criticizing the Fed and saying, look, the Fed doesn't know what it's doing. They're going to crash the economy. They're going to throw a lot of people out of work, which they're probably right. They're probably right. But the way I like to think about it is, at the end of the day, my opinion on whether the Fed is doing the right thing or not is irrelevant, right? So Tom's opinion, Walks on Wall Street's opinion of what the Federal Reserve is doing is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if I think that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is doing the right thing. It doesn't matter if I think he's doing the wrong thing. What matters is to come to terms with peace and to come to terms with reality that the Fed is going to take this thing and probably kill the economy and throw a bunch of people out of work. So how do I position myself accordingly to capitalize on that environment? Because regardless of if I say, hey, Fed Chair Jerome Powell, you're doing the wrong thing, I get all upset over it, it's not going to change anything. I think the most important focus that me and all of the viewers that are watching this is not to sort of put too much credence on our own opinions on if we think it's good or bad or not. Focus all of your time and energy on first coming to terms with the situation and how can you capitalize on an environment of sustained high interest rates. So what does that look like for you? What are the specific investments? What are the specific jobs or industries you want to get into? I think that is the most critical. Where are we at now, everybody? This is 848 Brickell. I don't think we've ever been here before on the stream. Hey, Mike says rampant long-term inflation is more dangerous than a recession. I agree with that. I agree, Mike. But everybody, if you are enjoying the live stream so far tonight, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We usually do these live streams about 5 days per week between New York City and Miami, covering the financial markets, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. So hit the subscribe button if you are new. Hey, Max, it's Tom. I paid $4.03 for gas yesterday. I was like, huh? It was just $3.73. You know what? That is a little bit strange because I think crude oil now is trading at around $83 a barrel. So that is quite surprising. Hey, Vinny is here. Says, thank you, Tom, for the walk. Thank you, Vinny. I see Brian. I see Nathan. Welcome. Who else do we have? Hey, Austin City Limits. Trust you're well. Here we are. We are outside of the Bank of America Tower. Maybe we'll make a left and do one more pass through Brickell. Yeah, Mike C says the inflation destroys the most vulnerable. I agree. Hey, Transport Simulator Nation says, hey Tom, you are all lucky that you guys didn't get hit by the hurricane. It did a number on Southwest Florida, I know. I am extremely, extremely grateful that we did not take a direct hit from this storm. And my heart goes out to everybody, especially in Fort Myers, Florida. The moment I saw those videos and photos on Twitter from Fort Myers, it brought back memories of what Long Beach, Island Park, and Oceanside, New York looked like after Hurricane Sandy. It was almost like eerily similar. Now, I'm not sure, there's probably many New Yorkers in the chat. If you've been on the Long Beach boardwalk before Sandy, and then if you ever visited Long Beach like 3 months, 4 months after Hurricane Sandy, the entire boardwalk was just decimated. There was literally no boardwalk. They actually had to rebuild the entire boardwalk, and I think much of it is actually concrete. It's just really, really horrible stuff. I'm trying to figure out which way we should cross. You know, I really want to take you guys over this bridge, but for some reason I think the internet's no good. But we might as well give it a try. If we start to buffer, who cares? Because Brickell Key is really, really beautiful. It's one of my favorite places in Miami. Hey, Robert Miller says, hey Tom, for a brief time, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage was 7% today. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, the average, according to bankrate.com, the average right now is about 6.82%, which means, you know, depending on your credit class and your ability to pay, people are probably getting quoted 7% rates already, and many are probably still getting quoted, I don't know, maybe like a 6.25% depending on your credit risk. But it's crazy. I mean, these prices are going to have to come down here, especially as rates push 7%. It's going to have to come down. Light Engines. Is Tom, any good museums here? Yeah, so there's the Frost Science Museum that's a little bit further to the north. We usually actually start the live streams from there, but Running at Altitude says builders are offering to buy down the rate and pay for closing costs. Yeah, so Running at Altitude, that's a fantastic comment. I'm glad you brought that up. I think we analyzed Toll Brothers' earnings report, and one of the things that I believe the CFO of Toll Brothers said is he said that in order to not only close new business, So think about what a culture change this is. Not only to close new business, they are offering steep discounts, maybe to buy down your points and pay your closing costs, but they are actually doing this to keep existing contracts from canceling, right? Because obviously if you're building a new home and you want to back out of the deal, in order to prevent customers from backing out of said deal, they're throwing the kitchen sink at them. So this is why I've been saying, I'm like, look, I think if you are a new home buyer, especially single family home buyer, and you've been disciplined, you've done the right thing, you didn't get involved in all of this craziness of bidding wars, $100,000 over asking, I think you are going to get rewarded for your patience in Q1 and Q2 in 2023. Okay, now am I calling for Armageddon? No, I'm not calling for Armageddon, but I think prices are going to correct. It's not a bad thing that prices in the housing market correct here. I think that's a good thing, especially for the long-term strength of the U.S. economy. So there's going to be deals, there's going to be opportunity, especially, obviously we reviewed the markets a little bit. Before we go into that, we are going to cross the bridge. Now, I will warn everybody, the internet is probably going to go out, so just drop a comment in the chat if the signal strength is bad and we will turn back. Because usually we start to drop it right at this truest sign right here. Vonda Howard says, fingers crossed on that, Tom. We're purchasing in 2023. Hey, congratulations to you. Yeah, I mean, look, generally speaking, it has to cool, right? Just think about it conceptually like this. A home that was going for $550,000 when interest rates are 3%, that same house right now is still going for $550,000, but rates are 7%. Your payment has doubled. It has to come down. It has to come down. Now, maybe that's my famous last words. Nothing has to happen. But I got a good feeling that things are going to come down a bit. I'm not saying they're going to crash. I'm not saying it's going to be Armageddon. I'm saying I think things are going to normalize. All right, here's the test. Let's see. So for all of those that are unfamiliar, this is the bridge to beautiful Brickell Key. Okay, now I'm going to give you some positives and negatives of Brickell Key. The positive is that it's sort of your own secluded little island away from the hustle and bustle of downtown Miami and Brickell. Now, here is sort of the bad news. The bad news is it's sort of own secluded little island away from downtown Miami and Brickell. So if you're somebody that wants to be close to the action, you want to be close to the office, you want good public transportation around the city, yeah, unfortunately, this particular island of Brickell Key is probably not going to provide that for you. Now, granted, it's not a huge walk. It's not like a multi-mile walk to downtown Miami and Brickell, but it's a little bit of a hike, right? But the good news is, if you want something more private, if you want a really nice view looking at downtown Miami, this is probably the place to be for you, because you are going to see an amazing view. Let's say if you have an apartment here, you're staying at the beautiful Mandarin Oriental Hotel, you're not only going to have a beautiful view of the bay and the water, but you are going to have an amazing view of the icon Brickell, the W Hotel Bank of America, and the almost finished, which is my personal favorite building aside from 1000 Museum, the Aston Martin building, which should glow exactly like the Miami Tower. So I'm wondering if the internet is holding up. Let's see how it's holding up. Ryan Royal says the water is so calm. Yeah, after the storm rolled on through, the water was like glass. Now, if you want to check out a video that I took during Hurricane Ian, I was filming it right here. You could actually see some of the white caps here on the water. It was insane. But it looks like the internet is holding up, so we'll push on over Brickell Key. Now, the Mandarin Oriental is a very, very famous 5-star hotel, which is also present in the greatest city in the world, New York City, right at the Deutsche Bank Towers. So for all of those who are not new to the streams and you've experienced the beautiful New York City live streams, in the former Time Warner Center, which is now the Deutsche Bank Tower, you will see the Mandarin Oriental Hotel actually takes up some of the top floors right there at 25 Central Park West. Hey Jay, this sounds good, Tom. Thank God you're safe. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Jay. I'll give you guys a shot of the water. Maybe we'll see like a manatee or a dolphin jumping out of here. So the views are really, really nice here. Hey Latha, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Hey, Light Engines, is Tom, what was your plan if the hurricane was ground zero where you were? So if hurricane was supposed to hit like it hit Fort Myers here, and we were told to evacuate, I'd be on the first flight out back to New York City, which is what you're supposed to do. You're actually supposed to, if the government tells you to evacuate, you're supposed to evacuate because it makes a huge burden on the first responders that have to go in after the storm. You actually get in their way. So if I was told to evacuate, I would either be on the first flight out of Miami International back to New York, or I would rent a car and probably drive back to New York. But thank God that didn't happen. But generally speaking, look, I understand some people don't have the means to evacuate, right? Which is horrible. They don't have the money. Maybe they're disabled or something like that. So you're supposed to go to shelters, but some people just don't have the resources to get out, which I understand. And I'm very, very sympathetic to that, and it's horrible. And I think that maybe going forward, especially in flood-prone and hurricane-prone places like Florida, I would even consider New York and New Jersey. A lot of people don't know this, but New Jersey floods a lot, right? I have a lot of friends in New Jersey, and even if it's a really, really bad rainstorm, it can flood and be devastating floods there. So I think probably as a country and as individual states, we should probably have better protocols for evacuation. Because at the end of the day, these storms could be rather deadly. Wow, look at the view from here. Dr. Longus is good point for the first responders. Yeah, because the first responders are supposed to assess the damage, right? And if they have to take the 911 calls for people who are stranded that were supposed to evacuate, it could take additional time away from them. Dr. Long, this is true. I grew up in New Jersey, and you were right. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but New Jersey has a ton of rivers, and the flooding can be quite serious there. I read this as I think, unfortunately, a lot of those people died. Yeah, I can't even imagine that. Well, supposedly, I was watching the update from the governor, Ron DeSantis, and I think they said, I don't want to be spreading false news because it's only day one. But supposedly, again, allegedly, I don't know what the exact number is. I don't want to spread fear if somebody's watching, they have family members down there. But supposedly, as of right now, the experts say that there could be, hundreds of people either stranded in Fort Myers or dead. But again, I don't know if that's 100% confirmed. That's just what I heard from the update. I'm so surprised that the internet is holding up right here in Brickell Key. I think this is our first Brickell Key live stream. What's next is Hey Tom. There were a lot of mobile homes that got obliterated. Yeah, those are really the first ones to go. Yeah, Mike C says, I hope those estimates are inflated. I hope so too, man. It's devastating. Wow, is this scaffolding in Florida? This is insane. I feel like I'm having a flashback to Midtown Manhattan. You guys feel like you're in Midtown Manhattan? I do. So once again, I'll just quickly give that book recommendation for everybody. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about the similarities and differences to the monetary environment we have right now in 2022 to potentially the 1980s, when then Fed Chairman Paul Volcker took rates to 20%. So please pick up that book called Keeping at It by Paul Volcker. I think we just have something jumping out of the water here. Once again, that book is Keeping at It by Paul Volcker. And obviously Ray Dalio, which is the hedge fund manager at Bridgewater Associates and the founder of Bridgewater, he says that the best investors are the best students of history. So if we start to see an emerging trend, which I think we do right now, when the Fed is going to, quote unquote, keep at it until the job is done to kill off inflation, I think the Fed's going to overdo it. I think the Fed is going to continue to raise interest rates, which is unfortunately probably going to raise that unemployment rate and put some people out of work. So how do we best position our portfolios for a higher interest rate environment? What are some of the better investments we can make? How could we position ourselves? Well, we're not going to talk about that on tonight's live stream. We will discuss some idea generations on additional live streams, maybe tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that. But I think for now, we should be students of history and study the 1980s. Sorry if I'm a little bit zoned out. I'm trying to be on the lookout for any wildlife for you guys. Usually you'll see some sort of a dolphin or even a sea turtle pop its head up. And I would love to catch that on the stream for you guys. Hey, Abby says, you're walking on the edge near the water. Yeah, so this is the, I guess you can call it the flood barrier, storm wall. Hey, Vinny says, Fed gonna chicken out 6 weeks until elections. We had 30% less population in the 1980s as well, says Vinny. So Vinny, you think the Fed is going to pivot? I mean, we'll see. I disagree, but I definitely think your opinion is needed. I think it's good to see both sides of the argument here. Now, here's the reason why I don't think the Fed will pivot. And again, I could be totally wrong. And I'm wrong pretty much more than I'm right. And I think that's just par for the course for the investment business. I mean, I think something like the greatest investors of all time are only right like 45%. And that's very high. But here's the reason why I do not think the Fed will pivot. In the Fed's last, well, I should say at the conclusion of the last FOMC meeting, one of the things that Fed Chair Jerome Powell said in his speech, and I think if you go back maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did a stream breaking down, I actually wrote down the most notable quotes from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. And one of the things he said really, really stuck with me. And what he said was sort of along the lines of this, that he would rather see inflation be totally killed and unemployment rise than to see the Fed pivot too early, have full employment, and equity prices continue to go up. Because if you think about the people who are most impacted by inflation, it's the lower and middle class Americans, right? The top 1%, and even if you make a household income of, let's say, $200,000 a year, if your grocery bill is going up by $100 a year, is that going to be an inconvenience for you? Yeah, sure, it's going to be an inconvenience. Are you going to feel it, and is it going to be like a huge weight on your shoulders? Probably not. Probably not. But for a middle-class American, especially if somebody, maybe you are nearing retirement, you are living off of a fixed income, something like that, if your grocery bill is going up by even $50 a year, that is going to put extreme pressure on your way of life. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that. So I think that he is going to overdo it in order to bring inflation back down to his 2.5% target. And I think that may throw a lot of people out of work in the process. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that unemployment rate going to maybe 5%. Man, check out this view of the Aston Martin building here. Beautiful. Hey, Millens, is New York City or Miami, which one is better in terms of overall quality of life? Well, I think it really depends, Millen, on what you like. So for example, for me, I really like being in Miami during January, February, and March, because it is really, really cold and miserable in New York City in January, February, and March. But for me personally, in the summer, I like to spend a lot of my time in New York City because it's a very, very fun place to be. But I would say if you have a family and you have little kids, I think Miami's, especially in this part, is going to be a little bit safer for you. You know, for those of you who know, we do the live streams in New York, and almost every night in the live stream, we either get some crazy person coming up to me. One time we had a group of people rip my phone off the gimbal, try to steal it. And I think New York City is still the greatest city in the world by far. I love New York City. I think we're just going through a rough patch here. You guys know me to be a big, big optimist. But, you know, especially during the times I live stream in New York City, you have, you know, people strung out on heroin, especially near Penn Station. I just think that Miami, Florida is a lot cleaner of a place than New York. But again, this is not to knock New York City. Again, I'll restate. I think New York City is the greatest city in the world. I just think it's going through a little bit of a rough bump. You know, New York City will always be my favorite city, but I think if I had kids, I wouldn't want to raise them on the island of Manhattan right now. But I love both cities. I think they're both great places to be. I just think New York City is a little bit dirtier. You know, I will say this, and I never noticed this before. So I'll tell you a quick story, not to spend too much time on New York City. I'll tell you a quick story. So when my brother moved away from New York, and he went to Boston. And he would visit me in the city. We'd hang out, you know. I'd visit my apartment. And he would always make a comment to me. And he's like, Tom, I walk down the streets in New York and it smells horrendous. It smells so bad. He's like, how do you live here? It smells so bad. To which I said to my brother, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, are you crazy? I don't smell anything. It smells fine. I'm like, you're nuts. What are you talking about? So fast forward about a year, I moved down to Miami and I spent like 3 weeks here. I spent 2 weeks in New York, 2 weeks in Miami. And once I started spending a lot of time in Miami, you start to not get used to the smells of New York anymore. So whenever I go back to New York, I actually notice the horrible smell. It's when you live there so long, you just don't notice it. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? It doesn't smell. But I gotta be honest, every time I go back to New York City now, it doesn't smell like horrible, like where you can't even operate, but it's not like a pleasant smell. It doesn't smell good. It's weird. I don't know. I've lived there so long that you just become desensitized to it. But if you spend a month or 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months away from New York, and you come back, you're gonna notice that it's not the best smelling. But again, because I know whenever I talk about this stuff, my inbox is just braided with people getting so furious. How could you say bad things about New York? You stream in New York, you're from New York. I get it. I still think New York is the greatest city. I love New York to death. I have a lot of business contacts there. I made a lot of money in New York. I love it. I think it's just going through a rough patch. That's all. And I'm optimistic on the future. But man, this is a beautiful, beautiful view here. You know, I just can't get over the fact that this Aston Martin building right here is going to glow as bright as the Miami Tower. I just can't get over that. It's going to be insane. How are these people across the river here in Brickell Key going to be able to sleep? That's going to be insane. That's going to look amazing. Hey, Silva, does it smell like cigarettes? Yeah, maybe. Abby says it's because of the trash that is left on the streets and the curb. Maybe. Hey, Dr. Longus, is Tom, as a fellow Italian, how's the food in Miami compared to New York? Ooh, dude, you can't compare it, man. You can't compare it. That's one thing I'll say, everybody. Okay, for all of those people who, you know, grew up in New York and you're used to very good food all the time. Okay, not to say that Miami food is bad, it's not. But when you're used to walking around Chinatown, Little Italy, you know, the Upper West Side, and look, that's a very, very, very hard thing to compare it to. I mean, New York City has the best food on the planet from all over the world. So it's very, very high stakes to compare it to. But yeah, I just have to say Miami doesn't compare. I mean, I've had very, very good food here. If you want extremely good Cuban food, then you got to go to Miami, right? But if you're looking for a good Italian spot, even Thai food, Chinese food, it's just, you can't even compare it to New York, to be honest. Yeah, Silva says New York City has better food than Miami. Totally agree. Totally agree. Not to say that Miami doesn't have good food, but I think I've just been spoiled in New York. Abe blesses London has the best food. I'll have to take your word for it because I've never been to London. I would like to go. I would like to go to London. I'm so glad the stream is holding up here. Now, I hope the view is coming out good on the stream because it is so peaceful. I can't even describe how peaceful this is. The water is like glass. The palm trees are swaying in the wind. It's just like an amazing, amazing place. The one thing that freaks me out a little bit, and I think you guys will agree, look at how close the water is to the sidewalk here. It's literally like, there's only probably like a 12-inch gap, like a foot gap. but man, it's beautiful here. Imagine living in one of these condos, having this beautiful view. You could go outside late at night, walk around. Man, that is really nice. Oh my gosh, guys, we've been streaming for 2 hours. See, time flies when we're having fun, I guess. But you know what? I might as well take you guys with me. We got to walk all the way back over the bridge. See, that's the only thing that I have a critique about Brickell Key. Imagine if you live here and you want to just quickly go to downtown Miami. The only way to get off of this island, Brickell Key, is to walk all the way over here, over the bridge and down. There's no public transportation. So maybe as the city of Miami gets built up a little bit, they can maybe make a Metromover station that goes from here over to Brickell Key. Now, if you notice this building, this is actually where we started the live stream from. So the 20th floor is where I work out of. And you could see the big American flag in the distance. That's actually where we started the stream. So I'll take you guys with me as we go across. Just a quick conclusion, a quick recap of what we talked about tonight. We talked about the bond market at length. We talked about one of my main concerns that I have as it relates to the US equity market right now. So over the past 2 days, we tried to have many rally attempts on Wall Street. And that was even with the Dixie coming down a bit. Now, if you remember, the dollar has been going parabolic. It's been ripping people's faces off. The dollar got as high as, I think, 115. It's since come down to about 113, maybe 112. That 10-year US Treasury yield has come down substantially as well. And even with those two factors at play, this market can't hold any sort of a gain. So we're now exactly at the low where we were in June. And this type of environment where we have the global bond markets reeling here, liquidity drying up, this could potentially make for a situation where we have maybe like a 1987 style flash crash. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying we need to be cognizant of that because liquidity is drying up here. And it's not only the Fed who's tightening, remember, it's central banks around the world, right? With the exception of maybe the BOJ, the Bank of Japan, and Turkey. So I think we need to watch that. Tomorrow's stream will talk about some particular asset classes that may benefit in a sustained environment of high interest rates. So stay tuned for that. We will be live tomorrow at 8:30. Ooh, I think we got something in the water. Usually when you see like the big pools that go like that, it's a manatee coming up for some air. Now, I think manatees can stay underwater for about 5 minutes, but they can come up and it only takes them 1 second to fill 90% of their lung capacity. So I'll keep an eye out. If I see him, I'll point the camera there. Hey, Charles D says the view is enticing me to work a couple of weeks in Miami, maybe a month. Yeah, so Charles D, I think you would really enjoy that. I will give you a tip. If you want to come here for a month to work, depending on where you are, I would highly recommend coming here in January or February. Let's assume you're a New Yorker. So when I worked in New York, I worked in Lower Manhattan. February was right around the time where my seasonal depression would be reeling. So I would definitely take those 2 weeks or maybe a month to come visit during the peak winter, I would say. I think you would love it. You know, not for nothing, everybody. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to change up my strategy here a bit. What I think I may do with my property is only do it for, let's say, 3 months to 4 months at a time on Airbnb. Because there's a lot of snowbirds out there that are willing to rent out the entire property for like $3,000 a month for 4 months, just so they can have a place to stay for the winter. They'll have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, washer, dryer, a place to park their car, backyard for the kids to run around, 5 minutes away from Sunny Isles Beach. Because I've been getting hit up a lot on Airbnb with those specific requests about, hey, I may work for, 2 or 3 months during the winter, or would you be interested in renting out your entire house? And I'm like, I don't know about the entire house. But now that I'm doing the math on it, I'm like, wait, if I rent out my entire property for 4 months at the rates I think I could get, that'll pay my entire house note for a year. Wait, am I doing that right? This is embarrassing. I can't do math. No, yeah. 10. Yeah, exactly. That would pay for the entire mortgage for a year with the taxes, insurance, things like that. So I don't know. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. War Walker says do it. Yeah, but that's the thing. I really like living there too. But that's the thing. If you want to, maybe I'll have to bite the bullet. I think my next property purchase, that's why I'm hoping that this market cools a little bit. If I can get a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom in North Miami for right around 300, maybe I would probably purchase another property. But right now, those 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom homes are going for like $450, $475. Maybe not $475, but $450. I saw one sell for not too long ago for a one bathroom house. 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, sold for like $455 in North Miami, right off of Biscayne. It's just insane, this real estate market. It's just nuts. All right, I guess another good thing about Brickell Key is that they fixed the internet. So if you have Verizon service works really good. Hey, What's Next is here. Good to see you. Hey, Billy says, what neighborhood in North Miami? I'm not going to disclose that because I think I've discovered, maybe as the streams progress, I'll let you guys in on a little secret, but I think I've discovered a potential boomtown that I think has egregiously undervalued real estate in North Miami. And I think it's such an area of opportunity that I got to keep it between me and me for a couple of years. This is like, I think this is going to be like another Wynwood, if anybody is familiar with Wynwood. Also, if you're familiar with like Dumbo, Brooklyn, or Williamsburg. Now, back in the day, Williamsburg, Brooklyn was not like Williamsburg, Brooklyn right now. Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in some locations is more expensive than Manhattan. And I think I've found a particular part in North Miami that's very similar. And I usually tend to have a pretty good read on things because in 2015, I stumbled across, I think we got something in the water right here. Look right here. I stumbled across a neighborhood in Miami called Normandy Shores, Normandy Isles, whatever you want to call it. And at the time in 2015, you could get a home in Normandy Shores, Normandy Isles for probably about $450,000 to $500,000. Every single one of those homes now is going for over $1 million. And I remember I went on my first trip there. My company put me up in an Airbnb. I was like, this place, I'm like, how is it possible that it's even allowed for somebody to buy a home on this island for less than $500,000. I remember saying that. I said it to my mom, I think. I'm like, this is like $1 million pieces of property. And granted, they are. I actually just walked that neighborhood a little bit today, and what a lot of people are doing is buying up the old homes on Normandy Shores, demolishing them, and they're building these ridiculous mega mansions. So they spent $1 million for the home. They're gonna knock the whole thing down and make these futuristic, ridiculous looking homes. And they did the same thing in Williamsburg. So a lot of people were either bought out by developers or something like that. So I have a particular neighborhood that I discovered one night when I was riding my bike in North Miami, where I had a little bit of the same impression. I was like, oh my gosh, this is money. You know when you walk a particular neighborhood and you could just smell the money? You're like, oh my God, this place is gonna, yeah. But more on that later. More on that later. Flowrider H2O, so do you think that property is always the best investment? No, I don't think that.